just because you're married to someone doesn't mean that if Secretary Hegseth has one of the highest levels of classification access, he can't just hand that to his wife and say, here, honey, hold my beer and hold my classified information. It doesn't work that way.
Hi again, everybody. It is 5 o'clock here in New York. I'm Alicia Menendez in for Nicole Wallace. In what feels like many lifetimes ago, but was only just last year, a relatively new administration was dealing with Signalgate, the scandal that exposed how details of upcoming strikes on Yemen were shared in multiple group chats on the app Signal, including one with Atlantic editor Jeffrey Goldberg. Now, I bring that up today because Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's wife, Jennifer, was in another one of those chats. And as you just heard Senator Coons tell me and my co-anchors on the weeknight last year, her involvement is not normal. Now, there's new reporting in the New York Times that further exposes the outsized role Jennifer Hegseth plays alongside her husband. Quote, Mrs. Hegseth was for years Mr. Hegseth's producer at Fox News as he built a broadcast career. Now, 7 years into their marriage, she is his most influential advisor and his de facto producer at the Pentagon. She has prepped him for appearances, sat in on his meetings with journalists, interviewed potential members of his staff, and brainstormed ideas for the Defense Department videos he, and sometimes she, appears in. Like this video, where she is seen working out with sailors and Marines on the USS Boxer in Singapore wearing a "This is War" t-shirt. Yet Jennifer Hegseth's involvement goes much further than PR videos and prepping her husband for interviews. More from the Times, quote, last year she was in a highly sensitive meeting with her husband and top British defense officials after the United States temporarily stopped sharing military intelligence with Ukraine, the Wall Street Journal first reported. In a previously undisclosed part of that meeting, a Trump administration official told the New York Times the British indicated that they had officers on the ground in Ukraine, and that without the U.S. intelligence, including early warnings of incoming missiles from Russia, the officers' lives were at risk. The British spoke in general terms, the official said, because the presence of Mrs. Hegseth made them uneasy. Later, they had a smaller meeting without her to go into detail. The Pentagon's chief spokesman said Mrs. Hegseth was only in the meeting for introductions, left soon after, and has not been present for any Defense Department conversation or meeting where classified information was discussed. But a former chief spokesman for the Pentagon does not think this should be taken so lightly. John Uliat, who left after working under Pete Hegseth for 3 months, said, quote, it's bonkers the defense secretary would involve his wife in his sensitive official duties, including sharing details of an impending military operation and face zero consequences. Any president deserves better judgment from his national security leaders. And that is where we begin this hour with staff writer at The Atlantic, Tom Nichols. He's a professor emeritus of national security affairs at the U.S. Naval War College and military analyst. Retired Lieutenant General Mark Hertling is here. He served as the commanding general of the U.S. Army in Europe. It is good to see you both. General Hertling, the Times said there has never been a Pentagon spouse quite like Jennifer Hegseth. How alarmed are you by this reporting?
Alicia, there's an important distinction between giving advice to your husband and listening, and the distinction between that and exercising government authority is quite an interesting issue. If Jennifer Hegseth helps her husband prepare for television interviews or offers private advice in their home at night, that's their business. I don't care. But if the reporting in the Times is accurate, and I think it probably is, and that she interviews potential employees or influences Pentagon media policy or listens into a classified conversation with allies, it's something different. I had a kind of a flashback when I was in the Pentagon, the one tour I had in the Pentagon, and I was working as the war planner, watching Secretary Rumsfeld have conversations with his combatant commanders from all around the world and discussing contingency plans. I can't imagine what would have happened back then if Mrs. Rumsfeld had been in the room with them, and these four-star admirals and generals would be discussing what they plan to do in their area of operations. It just doesn't make sense.
I mean, Tom, listen, this is a Secretary of Defense who already has a history of not understanding how to handle important classified information. You have this report that the British had to adapt their meeting because of Jennifer Hegseth's presence. It would be one thing if it were not interfering with our allies. The fact that you have other governments saying this is weird is embarrassing for us all.
It's also astonishingly unprofessional. This is not, no matter where you work, the rule is that, every day is not bring your spouse to work day. Does she have a clearance? Does she have a title? Is there some, accountable role that she feels, look, the one thing Pete Hegseth and I have in common is we were both once Republicans, and nobody in the Republican side liked it when Bill Clinton said, I'm going to start bringing the first lady into policymaking with no Senate oversight, no other role. That was an understandable gripe to say, you can't just bring a family member in and sit her down and say, by the way, my wife's going to, look over our shoulders here on this meeting. I find it astonishing on so many levels, including the hypocrisy here. Hegseth is really the chief advocate for, manly men, gusto, testosterone, guys being guys, except that he apparently has to bring his wife with him everywhere, which to me, I'm sorry, but I don't care if it's poker night or I'll just say this. My wife is my best friend, my closest advisor. I love her dearly. And yet she does manage to let me get out of the house unsupervised on occasion, trusting that I am not going to screw things up. This is a deeply weird, but also deeply unprofessional and, yes, damaging to the Defense Department arrangement. It shouldn't be happening, but it tells you something not just about Pete Hegseth, but about this whole circus that seems to be operating in the administration now.
Well, to that point, General Hertling, your latest piece is titled, Who Would Want to Be Friends with America Now? And in it, you write, alliances are relationships built over years, administrations, war, crises, and disagreements. Presidents inherit them from their predecessors, sustain them for their successors, and occasionally strengthen them through careful diplomacy. But presidents can also destroy them. That destruction rarely occurs with a formal announcement. More often, trust erodes incrementally. Can you speak to what this administration is doing to our standing in the world during this incredibly intense and complicated time?
Yeah, it is. I'm laughing at Tom because he's bringing it down to the gut level, Alicia, as he often does. And I love how he poses things. But I keep going back to imagine being a combatant commander or a service chief or a British defense official who's coming in for what you believe is an official conversation with the Secretary of Defense, and you need to find out what the classification level and the need to know of these defense plans are to his wife. It is just gobsmacking. I mean, my wife is my best friend too. And when I was serving, I would bring issues home to her and say, what do you think? Here's what I did on this. What do you think I did? And she would give me advice, but I'm not bringing her into the room to discuss those things that might be classified, because classification also means that you have a need to know. And Jennifer Hegseth does not have a need to know classified information. But in terms of our allies, they're all seeing this. This isn't just Jennifer Hegseth. What is Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff doing without classified information or security classifications, going around talking to other countries and seemingly having discussions about war plans and what's going to happen? If they want to be in government, unfortunately, they have to apply by the rules of government. So they're not just leaking information or using it for their business deals. It's specifically for the United States. And Alicia, I got to tell you, I know because I'm hearing from them, our allies are saying what's going on, and they are keeping secrets from us. And that's when it becomes dangerous.